I have watched people make a very expensive mistake with Social Security, and it usually begins with a sentence that sounds intelligent. They say the only rational move is to wait until 70. On paper, that sounds disciplined. On paper, it sounds like patience, sophistication, and mathematical maturity. On paper, it sounds like the kind of move a prudent adult makes after a lifetime of work. But I have spent most of my life learning that paper can hide more damage than it reveals. A man can own a wonderful business on paper and still go broke if the cash flow comes at the wrong time. A family can look prosperous on paper and still live under enormous strain if every dollar arrives too late. A retiree can wait for the biggest possible Social Security check and still make the poor decision if the waiting forces pressure into all the other parts of the plan. That is the mistake. People isolate the Social Security decision as if it exists inside a glass box. They ask the wrong question. They ask whether a smaller check now is worse than a bigger check later. They compare age 62 to age 70 as if the only thing changing. That is not how real life works. Social Security does not sit in a vacuum. It touches your IRA withdrawals. It touches your taxes. It touches your Medicare premiums. It touches the size of the check your surviving spouse may live on. It touches the number of shares you may be forced to sell in a bad market. It even touches your peace of mind. And peace of mind has economic value whether the spreadsheet captures it or not. Most people are taught to look at the monthly check. I look at the full machine. And when I look at the full machine, I still believe that for many people waiting is the better move. I want to be plain about that. Delay often wins. The larger guaranteed payment can be extremely valuable, especially for healthy people with long life expectancies and limited other protected income. But that is not the same as saying delay always wins. Always is a dangerous word in finance. The world is full of people who were ruined by always. Always buy the dip. Always hold real estate. Always maximize leverage. Always wait on Social Security. Always trust that tomorrow will resemble the average. The average does not pay your bills. The average does not comfort a widow. The average does not rescue a portfolio that is being drained in the wrong year. A retirement plan is not built for the average. It is built for the household that actually has to live inside it. So let me tell you how I think about this. When somebody asks me whether they should file for Social Security at 62, I do not start with the size of the check. I start by asking what problem the money is being asked to solve. That is the first shift in identity. If you think like a claimant, you ask, how much can I get? If you think like an owner, you ask, what pressure does this remove from the system? That change alone separates people who make decisions by headline from people who make decisions by architecture. The first architecture issue is time, not market time, lifetime. If you are in extraordinary health, your parents live deep into their 90s, your spending is stable, and your plan depends on maximizing guaranteed lifetime income far into old age, waiting can be beautiful. A larger inflation-adjusted check later is real protection against longevity risk. I respect that logic, but if your health is compromised, or your family history is quietly screaming a message nobody wants to say out loud, the math changes whether the financial industry likes it or not. The break. Even analysis between taking Social Security at 62 and waiting until 70 often lands somewhere around age 79 to 81. Live well past that and the larger later check usually wins. But what if your father died at 71 and your mother at 74? What if your body is already negotiating with you every morning? What if the years between 62 and 72 are the years when you can still travel, still think clearly, still enjoy your freedom without building your life around doctors and medications? I do not believe in pretending $1 at 95 has the same practical value as $1 at 60. That is not finance, that is theater. Money has utility, and utility changes with age, health, mobility, and family reality. I have seen people delay benefits in the name of mathematical purity only to discover that the years they sacrificed were the only years they could have truly used the money with energy and choice. If the timeline is shorter, taking the check at 62 is not surrender. It is alignment. You are not losing to the system. You are refusing to let the system force you to behave as if your life will unfold like a textbook. That is one case where early filing makes perfect sense. The second case is even more misunderstood because it has nothing to do with dying early and everything to do with retiring into the wrong market. Most people underestimate the violence of sequence risk. They think risk means average return. It does not. Average return is a statistic. Sequence risk is an order of events problem, and order matters more than people think. If you retire and the market falls hard in your first year or two, the damage is not just emotional. It is mathematical. Every withdrawal you take from a declining portfolio sells more shares at worse prices. Those shares are gone. They do not participate in the recovery. The portfolio is not merely down. It is being hollowed out while it is weak. That is how retirements break. Not usually through one dramatic collapse, through repeated selling when the account is injured. Now imagine a 62-year-old household drawing $8,000, $10,000, or $12,000 a month from retirement accounts while markets are down. Every distribution feels normal because the bills still get paid. But underneath the surface, the future is being sold away at a discount. In that environment, two can function like a pressure release valve. It is not about greed. It is not about impatience. It is about substituting a government check for forced portfolio liquidation. A couple $1,000s a month coming in from Social Security is not merely income. In the right year, it is a shield. It buys time. Time for the portfolio to recover. Time for you to stop selling assets at the bottom. Time for fear to leave the room. People like to call that a smaller check. I call it emergency portfolio relief. A retiree who files at 62 during a sharp downturn may preserve far more long-term wealth than the retiree who heroically waits until 70 while draining an IRA into a falling market. Again, the check is not the point. The breathing room is the point. The third case is where the conversation becomes more sophisticated and frankly more valuable. This is the married couple coordination problem. When one spouse earned much more than the other, the Social Security decision is not two individual choices. It is one household strategy. I have watched couples get this badly wrong because they each think in isolation. He wants to wait. She wants to wait. They hear that delay is best. So they both delay. The spreadsheet says the maximum benefit is coming later, and everybody feels intelligent. But households do not live on intelligence. They live on cash flow. Suppose the lower earning spouse takes a smaller benefit at 62 while the higher earner delays to 70. Now money enters the household earlier, portfolio withdrawals fall, taxable IRA distributions may shrink. Meanwhile, the larger earner keeps growing the more valuable benefit, which may eventually become the survivor benefit for the spouse left behind. That last point matters far more than most people realize. When the higher earner delays, they are not only buying a larger personal check, they may be building the widow's or widower's future income floor. That is not a small decision. I have seen widows spend 10 or 15 years living on a benefit determined by a filing choice made years earlier at a kitchen table conversation. Nobody thought was that important. It was important. A household where the smaller earner files early and the larger earner delays can sometimes accomplish three things at once. First, it gets money in the door when the household most needs flexibility. It reduces strain on the investment portfolio during the early retirement years. Third, it maximizes the more important long-term survivor check. That is not a compromise. That is often the superior architecture. People who think only in terms of maximizing both checks miss the household mathematics entirely. The system is not asking you what feels ideologically pure. The system is asking which lever protects the family. The fourth case is more uncomfortable because it involves trust. And trust is one of those assets that tends to disappear right before you need it most. I do not like making retirement decisions out of panic. That is usually a mistake. But I also do not believe in ignoring real institutional risk simply because talking about it sounds impolite. If you are a person who plans around certainty rather than hope, if you dislike the idea of depending on future lawmakers to preserve every scheduled benefit exactly as promised, then taking Social Security earlier can make rational sense. This is especially true for people who do not need the largest later check to maintain dignity and security. There are people who hear projections about future funding stress and shrug. They assume Congress will fix it. They may be right. There are others who hear the same projections and say, I would rather collect a known reduced benefit now than wait for a perfect benefit later that may exist only in brochures and campaign language. That is not paranoia. That is preference. Finance is full of places where people confuse probability with certainty. I do not do that. If a household values certainty, then certainty has economic value. A guaranteed stream begun now may be worth more to that household than an actuarially superior stream later. You should know your own temperament here. Some people can tolerate policy uncertainty. Some cannot. A good plan is not the one that wins the abstract argument. It is the one the household can actually live with for the next 20 years without second guessing every headline. The fifth case is the one almost nobody sees until someone runs the tax map and the whole picture changes. This is the IRA substitution effect. Most retirees think of Social Security as income. That is too shallow. In practice, Social Security can act as a tax-shaping instrument. Let me explain what I mean. If you retire and fund your life entirely from traditional IRA withdrawals, every dollar coming out is ordinary income, not some of it, all of it. Those distributions stack on your return, swell your adjusted gross income, and interact with everything else in the tax code. That larger taxable income can increase the portion of Social Security benefits that become taxable later. It can push you into Medicare premium surcharges. It can reduce flexibility for Roth conversions in low bracket years. It can turn a manageable tax plan into a clumsy tax trap. Now suppose instead that one spouse begins Social Security at 62. Some portion of the spending need is now being met by a stream that may be taxed more favorably than a dollar pulled from a traditional IRA. Suddenly, the portfolio withdrawal need declines. The household may have more room inside a chosen bracket. The pressure on future RMD planning may soften. That is where the generic advice collapses, because the question is no longer, should I take a smaller Social Security check? The real question is, what happens to the tax machine if I do? Sometimes the answer is that early Social Security makes a broader retirement tax strategy possible. It can preserve bracket space. It can create room for calculated Roth conversions in the years before required minimum distributions begin. It can reduce the need to drag every living expense through fully taxable IRA dollars. And when people understand that, the filing decision stops being a Social Security decision at all. It becomes a tax sequencing decision. That is the level on which serious planning. Now, I want to say something most people need to hear. Taking Social Security at 62 is not brave. Waiting until 70 is not brave either. These are not moral choices. They are engineering choices. The financial industry often turns these decisions into personality tests. The disciplined wait, the fearful file early, the sophisticated optimize, the impatient grab cash. That is nonsense. I have seen disciplined people file at 62 and make the better move. I have seen patient people wait until 70 and make the worse move. The virtue is not in the age. The virtue is in the fit. That is the operating system I want you to adopt. Do not ask what the smartest people on television say. Do not ask what the average retiree should do. Do not ask what produces the biggest possible monthly check in a vacuum. Ask what role the money must play inside your household. Does it need to protect a damaged portfolio? Does it need to support the lower earning spouse while the larger benefit grows? Does it need to hedge against a shorter life expectancy? Does it need to reduce the pressure of fully taxable withdrawals? Does it need to replace uncertainty with certainty because you know your own tolerance for institutional risk? Once you ask better questions, the answer changes shape. This is where I think many people lose a tremendous amount of lifetime value. They chase the largest visible number and ignore the invisible savings. They wait for the bigger monthly check and fail to notice the extra taxes they pay while waiting. They celebrate delayed benefits while selling beaten-down investments for 8 years. They preserve optionality for the future while depriving the present. They maximize the wrong metric. I learned a long time ago that in investing, the most dangerous mistakes are usually made by people who measured the wrong thing with impressive confidence. A business can report beautiful earnings and still have rotten cash flow. A stock can look cheap and still be expensive if the business quality is poor. A retirement plan can show a higher monthly Social Security check and still be weaker if the household balance sheet takes damage elsewhere. You must train yourself to look through the first number and into the system beneath it. That is how you stop being manipulated by headlines. That is how you stop making decisions that feel intelligent but produce fragile outcomes. If you are still working full-time at 62 and earning above the earnings, test limits, that is a different matter. Early filing can reduce current benefits, at least temporarily, and the analysis must be adjusted. If you have extraordinary longevity and little need for portfolio support, delaying may still be the best move. If you are single, healthy, asset-light, and heavily dependent on guaranteed income decades from now, waiting may be exactly right. I am not trying to talk you into filing early. I am trying to stop you from using a slogan where a plan should be. There are people who need the highest guaranteed future check. There are people who need the earliest stabilizing cash flow. There are people whose marriage makes the answer different from what either spouse would choose alone. There are people whose taxes make the answer different from what break. Even charts imply there are people whose health makes delay an elegant mistake, and there are people whose portfolios are strong enough to wait comfortably, which is a luxury not everyone should pretend they have. So here is the final test. Do not ask whether filing at 62 gives you less or waiting until 70 gives you more. Ask this instead. If you wait, what exactly are you asking your household to absorb between now and 70? More withdrawals, more tax pressure, more survivor risk for a spouse, more exposure to a bad market sequence, more dependence on future political fixes. More years spent pretending your health is an actuarial average. Now flip it. If you file at 62, what exactly are you buying? Not just a check breathing room, tax flexibility, household coordination, survivor planning, portfolio protection, usefulness, while you are still healthy enough to enjoy it. That is the mirror I would put in front of every retiree. The wrong Social Security decision is not the one that leaves money on the table, according to a generic chart. The wrong Social Security decision is the one that ignores the household you actually live in, the risks you actually face, and the years you actually have. I have never cared much for elegant theories that collapse on contact with real life, and retirement planning is real life in its purest form. It is not about winning an argument. It is about building a structure strong enough to carry you, and the person beside you through years you cannot fully predict. Sometimes that means waiting. Sometimes it means taking the money at 62. The intelligent move is not to worship either choice. The intelligent move is to know what problem you are solving before you pull the lever. That is how wealth is protected. That is how regret is reduced. And that is how a decision that looks small from the outside can become one of the most important contracts you ever sign with your future self. Let me give you one more lens, because this is where people who love spreadsheets often fool themselves. They treat the Social Security choice as if the goal were to maximize expected dollars in isolation. But no retiree spends isolated dollars, they spend coordinated dollars. A dollar that arrives from Social Security is not interchangeable with a dollar pulled from an IRA at the wrong time, in the wrong market, inside the wrong bracket, with the wrong Medicare consequences attached to it. The source changes the downstream effects. That is the whole game. Two households can spend the same $12,000 a month and end up in radically different long-term positions, depending on which account the money came from and when it arrived. That is why the simplistic break-even chart is so seductive and so incomplete. It tells you the age at which one filing path produces more cumulative Social Security than another. Fine, useful as a starting point. But it does not tell you what happened to the portfolio between 62 and 70. It does not tell you whether one spouse died at 68 and the survivor needed the larger record. It does not tell you whether the household crossed an IRMA threshold because of avoidable IRA income. It does not tell you whether early benefits allowed a series of low-bracket Roth conversions that permanently lowered future RMD pressure. It does not tell you whether the household avoided selling appreciated assets in a bad tax year or depressed assets in a bad market year. It gives you an answer to a smaller question than the one retirement actually asks. I have no patience for smaller questions when the cost of being incomplete is so high. There is also a psychological truth here that people rarely say out loud. A retirement plan that is technically optimal but emotionally unlivable is not optimal. If a couple delays benefits and spends the next 8 years worrying about every market downdraft, every IRA withdrawal, every tax estimate, and every headline about Social Security funding, that strain matters. Households make better long-term decisions when the plan is sturdy enough to let them think clearly. A smaller check that stabilizes the rest of the system can create better behavior, and better behavior compounds, just like money does. Good planning reduces the odds that fear becomes your chief investment officer. And that is another hidden benefit of the right Social Security timing. It can lower the emotional temperature of retirement. I want you to notice how different this is from the way the topic is usually sold. The public conversation loves absolutes because absolutes are easy to package. Wait until 70, never wait. Beat the system, claim now before it is too late. All of that is garbage designed to attract attention from people who are tired and scared. Real planning is quieter than that. Real planning sounds like this. What is your life expectancy distribution? Not just your optimism. What happens to your spouse if you die first? How much of your spending over the next 8 years would otherwise come from fully taxable accounts? How exposed are you to a poor sequence of returns? What are your bracket boundaries and how sensitive are your Medicare premiums to income spikes? How much guaranteed income do you already have from pensions or annuities? How much flexibility do you need? Not just mathematically, but emotionally. Those are adult questions. And adult questions produce adult answers. If you are one of the many people approaching 62, I would urge you not to outsource this decision to folklore. Run the full household map. Look at the next 10 years, not just the next check. Model the survivor case. Model a bad market in the first 3 years. Model the tax effect of replacing ERA income with Social Security income. Model what happens if you wait and are right, then model what happens if you wait and the world refuses to cooperate. Only then do you deserve to feel certain. I have always believed that the purpose of money is not to impress people. It is to reduce unnecessary fragility. When Social Security is timed correctly, it does exactly that. It makes the household less fragile. Sometimes the path to that result is patience. Sometimes the path is taking the check at 62 with full awareness and no apology. The answer is not hidden in dogma. It is hidden in the interactions.